let's take a look at your final project drafts. Just to start, um, as an intro, I like what I see from everybody so far. There are a couple of things that I wanted to mention for everybody straight off. To make sure, not everybody did this, but to make sure that we're using placed text rather than copy and pasted text, and also using our text threads, so threading from one text box to another. This makes adjusting columns and sizes a little bit easier, as if you have threaded text, you have to pardon my dogs. If you have threaded text, it will allow you to sort of adjust accordingly. Like here, it will automatically adjust. As you can see, this shifts. If you decide you want to have like one column here, you can see now it kind of adjusts. It adjusts the text for you within those threaded columns. So just to make sure that we're using threaded text and also placing our text into our files. I don't know why I blanked on that. Into our files rather than copying and pasting text. Again, this sort of helps us keep that text file linked. In theory, if you have an editor making changes and things like that, this way you always have the most current revision. All right, so that said, let's take a look at Zylos here. So we have our page 1 and 2, 3 and 4 here, and 5 and 6. So overall, I think it's a pretty good start. I think that some of your text boxes, like having two columns and one column, are a little bit clunky is not the right word, but if you were to sort of have, like here, it kind of works because you have one column and then going into two across two columns here. And I would suggest, instead of having like one or two columns across like this and one column, maybe switching the image. So if you had like this image up here, oh, it's just not gonna let me do it. The text down here, an image up here. You might have to adjust your text boxes a little bit there, but just kind of having it flow like this rather than having, if you have two columns and then one column right next to each other, it looks a little bit awkward. And then maybe work with your intro just a little bit. Maybe even potentially make this image smaller. I would suggest either making that image smaller or even this image a little bit smaller. I'm kind of resizing your frame there, but instead of having, this text column broken up here, have your headline go across the top here, and then maybe adjust your image or change the image so that it goes across, the three columns, or, maybe drop it down. Maybe drop this down, even as I'm wrecking your whole thing. Maybe drop this down a little bit just to give yourself some more room for the headline and the image there. I think having that text box like this is a little bit awkward. It's a little bit hard to read. So even if you had like Discover across the top here, and you could have, more about Prince or something like that to simplify it a little bit. I think, other than that, really, I think that this page works really well. I like how you have it, the headline, or the not headline section broken out. It starts with his childhood, and then you have the images work well. I think for this, you might need to cheat this down a little bit. Again, like watching these, they're called orphans. So watching these little orphans, you might be able to cheat this down slightly, and then bring that image or bring that text box down just a little bit, and then that gives you a little bit more room here, to have this text box here. so we don't have that little orphan there. As far as this text box goes, I might adjust and have like the image go, have this image go down to the bottom. It's really just kind of cleaning up a little bit, and maybe making, these gaps a little bit more even. So that way, it's just like visually, it's a little bit more even across the board, if that makes sense. Really, just kind of like evening out some of these columns and some of the pictures. You could even bring that up a little bit if you wanted to have that. Actually, you could even have these across. You don't have to have all these aligned across the bottom, but kind of like finding that sweet spot to sort of just clean it up and have all of your gutters and gaps a little bit more even. Sort of a similar thing for this section as well. You kind of have, even if you were to potentially get rid of, um, that will allow you to have that section sort of end here and maybe push this text down more towards the bottom to join with this kind of like orphan paragraph, and then that way it flows better into these next sections. And again, just sort of like a similar kind of thing, just sort of maybe reorganizing and shifting just a little bit. I think you still have, well, maybe not. There's probably just a return there. I thought maybe you had some overset text, but there's probably just a return there to clean up, but no big deal. But yeah, I think on this page too, just kind of like cleaning up the section a little bit, even if you had, if you wanted to have like this image or even this image go like across the spine. It gets a little bit tricky for printing, but in theory we can make that work. And that might allow you to sort of readjust all of these. And then sort of lastly, we want to make sure that we have our Rolling Stone and our publication date on our pages as well. Looks like you have your interactivity started at least. But yeah, I think overall a really great job. I think just some organization and some sort of cleaning up, I think here would work really well. All right, let's go to Katryvna's. Is in Adobe here, as I had the PDF. So we talked about this. Let me make sure, go back to page 1. There we go. So we talked about this in class, that your orientation is off, which we understand. So that might really adjust how this looks. You might be able to move, this more towards the top, and then kind of keep similar structure. You might have to organize your columns a little bit. But I think overall, as far as the look, I don't think it's too bad. I think having the one column of text here and then one column going into 2 columns of text, I think works pretty well. If your navigation buttons work. Again, this is just going to be sort of like reorganizing. You might be able to do this similar image going over the spine of the magazine. Again, it's just going to be sort of like rearranging this and see how your text flows with it. But I think overall there's a good balance here of text and image. Again, you want to make sure that you have your publication, not Rolling Stone, Juxtapost, have your publication and publication date on your pages as well. Yeah, and again, I'm sort of broken record here. Again, this might take some reorganization, maybe even losing one of these images. Again, when the orientation flips, it's gonna take a little bit of reorganization. You might need to split some columns, etc. But I think overall you have a good balance of positive and negative space. Really it's going to be that sort of reorganizing and adding that publication and publication date, and making sure that we're staying within our margins and our safe zones and using any bleeds if needed. Yeah, you have your bookmarks in there, which is great. So yeah, I mean, so far everything else looks pretty good. This one was sort of quick-ish because some of the stuff we talked about and we knew going in, but I think again overall I think you have a really good solid look. It's just going to be kind of that reorganization, restructuring, and just sort of kind of keeping that same sort of style that you have going. But I think overall, great job. All right, let's go to Mikayla's as we're switching programs here. Here we go. All right. So I'll kind of scroll through here. So I think overall, I think your navigation buttons work well. I think what you might need to concentrate on for yours is kind of making sure that sorry, just sort of again, kind of cleaning this up a little bit. Like it's kind of like all over the place. So you have your images. I kind of see what you're doing here. Like if you're trying to drive the viewer or the reader um, through your article, but I feel like especially here, the way that your images and your text are a little bit jumbled. I think cleaning it up and like sort of structuring it, like here you have a little bit more structure, but then there's all this like open space. Um, Even if you made all three of these images larger, even had this image, um, if you brought this down and had this image, um, oops, I'm hitting the wrong button. If you had this image a little bit bigger to fit proportionally, obviously you'd have to readjust these a little bit. But to have that, um, not fill up the space, but just sort of organize the space a little bit. I think overall it's a little bit jumbled. And then for this one, we want to make sure that we're not cropping images. Maybe you can find a different image, even the car image, because we can crop that one because it's got a few. We talked about cropping. It's got if it's something that has like a few images or a few pieces rather, we can crop, or even maybe use a car hood image for this, as it's a little bit more vertical, or even a joke painting to sort of fit. We don't want to actually crop his art, which is kind of ironic because that's what he does. But you get the general idea. I think overall yours is going to be more, um, formatting and just kind of, reorganizing. Even if you lose some of the pictures and make a couple of the pictures bigger, even if you had, it's hard for me to grab this image, but even if you had this image in the bottom corner here and had the text wrap go around it there, um, and then made this image a little bit bigger, things like that. Maybe even losing one of these images because you kind of have two similar images here. So like losing this image and maybe dropping the text down slightly, like your text box is down slightly to create more of a headline rather than just his name. That's part of the other thing we're coming up with these is a catchy headline. And then sort of lastly, adding that publication and publication date as well to your pages. But yeah, I think overall for this one, I think it's going to be like organizing, restructuring, like especially this, these columns need to be, within, pay attention to your column margins and your gutters. So that way, your gutters are even and your columns are a little bit even. I think this one, again, even if we get rid of this, you have a little bit of an orphan paragraph here. So even if, you made this image bigger, pushing some of this text to here, or even, having, one of these images up top and then having that push the text down a little bit. But I think yours is going to be a lot more sort of organizing and restructuring visually. You have a really strong start to your organization. But I think, again, overall, we just need a little bit more sort of visual structure and organization to just help the flow of your layout. Nice. All right, Sam is there. Okay. All right, we'll take a quick look through. As I'm getting quiet, sorry about that. So I think for this one, we have sort of the opposite going on, where we have a lot of free space, which I think could work. I think it works well, like for this page. Even if we wanted to have, let's see, I'm going to go back to, what is that normal? Okay. I just want to see if there's any guides or columns, because we didn't have the columns in there. It's hard to tell, but, I think maybe even spacing these out a little bit more if you, try to center this on the page so you have your center column centered, obviously, and then sort of giving it, giving each one of these a little bit more room, to make that sort of visually even, or if you really wanted to have them um, sort of have a lot of that space around them, just making sure that like the space to the right and left is even, and then even out your space in the middle there. It doesn't have to be even all the way across. You could even have them a little bit tighter. I just notched it 10 in on either side. It gets a little bit tricky with text like this. You can also adjust your paragraph settings, if I can find them. You can adjust your paragraph settings. Paragraph. There we go. To have them read justify full, and have your last line indent. So that way, sometimes hyphenation gets a little bit funky there, but that way all of your, again, you kind of visually have to find that like sweet spot. But this way, all of your columns are even. If you're going to have that much like breathing space around it, you might want to like even out your columns. You might need to adjust your tracking a little bit. You can kind of cheat. So you might need to adjust your tracking a little bit here. If we go to back to type and character. So here, where is it? There we go. So here's our tracking overall. So what that does is that allows us to adjust the general spacing between letters. 100 might be a little much, but again, you'll find that sweet spot where some of these gaps aren't so super massive. Again, justifying it like this may or may not be what you want visually, but I feel like I'll undo a little bit. Yeah, I feel like it reads a little bit better, even making your columns a little bit thinner. But I feel like if you're going to have that breathing space there, playing with the justification a little bit might help on just sort of cleaning it up. And then I might turn this into like a headline page, right? So instead of having like all this blank space, right? Even if you had, your image at the bottom and then had like a large cool headline or something like that, or even, have this at the top, 1/3 and then have 2/3, have a headline. Having that headline on the right side sometimes is a little bit different and, gets the viewer interested. And again, I think I think with this page, I think kind of like going to this kind of like negative space and giving yourself that negative space to work with, I think might work well. Again, even if we had, even if we move this down and then made these a little bit smaller, to give them a little bit of room in between each other, right? And scale these down overall to give it that breathing space that you have here. And then even playing around with this, if you wanted to, have a similar look to this, because you have plenty of room. You can even kick, depending on how small you make these text boxes, if you want to have, this text here, start on this page, even if you had it at the top, and then, or even if you had like headline, logo, and then have text start, or even opposite, if you had your headline down here and then had, 3 text boxes, essentially like this. I'm just going to copy and paste these, but, essentially like a similar kind of look, and had, your headline here, to give yourself that sort of consistent look through the whole thing. I think that, organizing it to have that negative space really be consistent and to work well visually, I think could work. And again, you have a lot of room here, again, just to sort of, even if you push some of this text, making these text boxes, similar to these, as thin as these, you still have plenty of room to push text to either this page, or even kind of make this page a little bit more even. I think overall that the negative space works really well. It can often offer like a really nice clean look. You just want to make sure that it's very consistent and very even overall. And then lastly, you have your Rolling Stone. You just want to make sure that you have your publication date, so you can even have, if you wanted to have Rolling Stone on one side and, you know, May 2024 on this side, or even have Rolling Stone slash hyphen whatever May 2024 and then May 2024. And you need to leave room for your navigation buttons as well and your interactivity, which you do. So even if you had like a small arrow here and a small arrow here, and then just kind of continue that through, you still have room to add that interactivity, which is good. I think overall, working with that negative space and sort of making it consistent throughout the entire 3 spreads, I think would help clean it up a lot. All right, let's go to Nicole's. So you have it blocked out pretty well. You're missing some images, so it's kind of like tough to fully critique it. But I think the blocking looks pretty good. I think a lot of the entire article basically is here. So I might play around with having larger images. Also, your intro page too. You might give yourself a lot of room here to have a headline, maybe a headline and even an image here. As you said, it'll be spread out, through all the pages. So that's going to be, how you balance your images and text. So again, you might need to make this text box, a little bit bigger overall, to have, even if you had, 2 columns of text here, or depending on how big you're going to have your navigation buttons. But I think just with the blocking of it, I think things look even. It'll be, it'll really be determined by, how you spread out the text and how you spread out the images as well. Even having, not to wreck your whole thing, but even if you had, this text or this image, had one image here and your headline and then text starting here. So yeah, how you lay out and how you spread out that text across the 3 pages is going to be key, obviously. But I think here you have a good balance, a potential good balance with, text here, images here, even text and like if you wanted to have a pull quote here, or rather image rather, and then have a pull quote here or some kind of graphic, or even a pull quote here, and had, even if you drop that down a little bit, have a pull quote here, and then you can have some text. But looks like you have a fairly solid plan going forward. Again, just don't forget about your navigation and your bookmarks, etc., and then also labeling your pages with the publication and the month and year it's coming out. But yeah, I'm interested to see how you finish it off. Right, next is Alexis, and she is here. All right, so I think it's hard to tell just in the PDF, but we want to be careful. I like your intro that you have, but we want to make sure that we're not distorting the image. It looks a little bit stretched. You could probably still get away with having your title with where you want it, or even dropping it down into this area so it reads a little bit better. But yeah, you want to make sure that we're fitting proportionally rather than stretching. But yeah, overall, I think your intro works really well. I think having the 3 columns work. This page is a little bit awkward. There's a couple of things we can do. You can increase your gutter here just so so these 2 don't crash so much. I might, again, it's hard to tell without seeing the InDesign file, but I might give these a little bit more space. I think that's why it's kind of a little bit awkward to read. Even if you give it a little bit of extra space, just so, what you kind of want to do is go across and read it all the way across. So I think adding that space in between those 2 columns will help a lot. Maybe even making the image a little bit smaller and giving it a little bit more negative space overall could work. And then you have your navigation buttons working well. I will say about the navigation buttons, we don't need them in the middle just because they're spreads. So when we go back a page, we want to go back to here. So you really just need one here. You need your previous and your next here. And then I think you had a positional change, which was a little funky. Yeah, it looks like you have a rollover. So what you can do with rollovers, and now it's freaking out. There we go. You can also set positions for rollovers. So you just want to make sure that, and we can go over it in class too. You just want to make sure that in your buttons and forms panel, when you have that like rollover color, you just want to make sure that positionally they're in the same spot because you can have that change. So when you're rolling over, your arrow is actually moving. So yeah, you don't need these middle ones, so that'll free up a little bit of room. But yeah, I think using these two images and having the pull quote is really cool. Again, we want to make sure that we're not squishing the images at all. Here, they look a little bit distorted. Yeah, I might try breaking these blocks into two columns. So you have one column read here and then continue down here and then have it start in the right column. See how it looks. You may or may not like it. I think that these are a little bit chunky with having these images um, right next to each other. I think maybe breaking up these blocks. You kind of have like block, 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 block. So maybe breaking up these into actually two columns might help. Even if it's typically you would read all the way down this column and then all the way down the next column. I don't know if I would go like read from here to here and then go down and read from here to here, but you could certainly try it to see which one flows better. And then I think again in general maybe breaking this into two columns just so again it's not so blocky. But yeah, lastly, really looking to make sure that you're not squishing images. Like I feel like this image is a little bit distorted. The guys in suits over here are a little bit distorted. I like the organization that you have, but again, it's tricky finding those sweet spots, especially with some awkward sized images. But you might need to give yourself a little bit more negative space between these photos, just to sort of make sure that you're not distorting the images at all. But I like the flow of this page, having the four images here and how they work together. Again, I think just breaking this up so you don't have such heavy blocks. Again, even making your images overall a little bit smaller could give them a little bit more room to breathe effectively on your second and third spread, maybe making the images a little bit smaller and increasing that negative space a little bit. But I think overall you have a really solid design and a great start. Right, who is next? So again, we have our PDF here. We have our navigation buttons in a little bit of a different spot, which is cool. I'll sort of cycle through. And we'll kind of go back here. Yeah. So I think I like your start page a lot. I think, having, sort of headline and then body copy and image and then body copy, I think works pretty well. I think honestly, I might make your navigation buttons a little bit smaller. They are a little bit big. I kind of like having them at the top. It's kind of a cool look. But yeah, I might make them a bit smaller just so they're not so massive in the layout. But yeah, I think your start page works really well. Again, we want to make sure that we're not distorting images. This one looks a little bit distorted. So if we're filling our frames, make sure you're filling your frames proportionally. But I think I think your first page works really well overall. And then again, making those navigation buttons a little bit smaller just so they don't take up so much space. I might swap these too, kind of like how you have this. Maybe have this image at the top and then have text at the bottom, just so it's not super text heavy on the top as it is now. And then it just kind of goes with the opposite of what you have here. So text, image, or rather, yeah, text, image, image, text, image, text, text, image, if that makes sense. Just kind of like reorganizing a little bit just so it's not so text heavy at the top. And then that kind of gives it a little bit more of a dynamic layout. And then even here, we have a little bit of a overlap here. And then I think just being consistent with your sizing. Overall, you want your body copy generally to be the same size. You can get away with it a little bit in your intro page. So like if this text was a little bit bigger, I'm not sure what size it is, but let's say this is like 14 point. You can kind of get away with it. You can get away with having it larger on your intro page, and then having this be like 12 point, let's say. So it's like 14 here or even 16. I don't know if that'd be massive, but 14-ish here and then 12 here. And then you just want to make sure that it's consistent throughout. So if that was 12, you want to make sure this is 12. You want to make sure this is 12, this is 12, and this is 12, and so on. So I think, making sure that your body copy is the same size. And again, your use of images works really well. We need to see what's up here with this overlap. But yeah, I think, adjusting the text so it's even overall, adjusting those images a little bit. Even if we made this image a little bit bigger or smaller, depending on how you need to reorganize this space a little bit when you get the text all the same size. But yeah, I think overall, it works pretty well. Let's see if you have your bookmarks in there yet. Not yet. Make sure we get all of our interactivity in there, your link to juxtapose, and then also, watch out. Oh, I think you have already actually. Let's go back. Yeah. So you have your link to juxtapose, and then it's really just adding those bookmark anchors, and they could just kind of be arbitrary as long as they're, you can have one here and like one here and one on your third page. Again, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for a small article like this, but it makes more sense in, like a larger catalog or a full publication, to go from section to section, etc. I just wanted to make sure you guys know how to do it. But yeah, I think overall, great start. Again, just sort of evening out your text, maybe swapping text and image on this page or this page if you wanted to keep it consistent with this, if you wanted to have image at the top and on this page image at the top. Sometimes swapping it around just to give it a little bit more sort of dynamic flow helps. And then again, just making sure your text is even on the next page. But I think overall, really good start. All right, and then we have Haley, who I believe is this one. Yes. So yeah, as we can see, oh, there we go. I was wondering why that was. See if you have, you have your bookmarks in there, which is great. So you can see our bookmarks just kind of take us to spots on pages. Again, for an article like this, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I just want to make sure you guys know how to do it. Yeah, I'll cycle through these. So we can see, let's go back. Yeah, so I think overall, I think this works really well. What I might do is just some sort of like nitpicky things. I think overall it flows really well. I think maybe adjusting your text a little bit, your columns, just so you don't have, these orphan paragraphs or these orphan, not sections, but these orphan lines. Even if you drop these three columns just a little bit to push the text. I thought there was another one. Yeah, even like, I know it's a little bit odd here, because you have your essentially your lyrics. But even if you pushed the lyrics, if you brought this column down a little bit, and then I can show you how to do it, but you can put a paragraph break or a column break right here, and then push these lyrics to here, maybe if they all fit, and then that will also bump this to start here. So I think just like some minor adjustments with your text just to have it flow a little bit better. But let's go back to the first page. I was kind of thinking, I like your intro. Your headline is great. I think maybe um, maybe even taking out the word clutch here and having this logo, or yeah, having the logo be here, even if it kind of breaks out of this. I can't move it because it's a PDF, but even if it overlaps and you have your clutch logo going here and then dropping down here, like that might give you a little bit more play to move some text around. This drops down like 2 lines basically, and then pushes the text here. It might help organize that text a little bit. And then you can kind of either make the gym room image larger here. It'll depend on how your text gets moved around, or even bringing your pull quote up in this section. Again, you might have to play around with how these two squares and your text works with that. Um, but yeah, I think again overall, it's really just kind of like organizing your text a little bit. So for like this one, like I said, again, maybe pushing this column a little bit away from, give it a little bit of room underneath the dummy caption in the picture. Even if you drop it down a line or two, maybe kind of see if it works, but putting a break here so that the lyrics start here, and then even if they go into this column, and then kind of keep pushing it to the third page. Even moving this image down a little bit so that your columns at the top here are a little bit longer. But yeah, I think overall, I think it works. I think it's going to be, reorganizing that text just a little bit. I might even get rid of this image here. Um, yeah, maybe even get rid of this image here. Depending on how your text pushes, you might be able to make this picture a little bit larger, or even if you did make it larger, maybe not this big, but if you had it, kind of here, give or take, maybe make him a little bit smaller. So you kind of had like him go across, 2.5 columns or 2 2/3 columns, and the same thing down here, 2 2/3 columns. Maybe to try to organize that text a little bit. But yeah, I like your pull quotes. I like the look of them. I think in this case you might have, like, I think it works on this page. It's going to depend on how the text gets reorganized. You might need to make like this image a touch smaller, but kind of how you have, these two images like this, and the text flows in between them. I know it's kind of hard to do that with more square images. You can crop these a little bit, the images of them playing. Even if you had kind of a similar look on this page as you do on this page here, to kind of keep that consistency. I think your start works really well. It's going to be kind of like, I think reorganizing text just a little bit, having it flow a little bit more. Like I said, maybe move this logo down here in this area, and then that'll allow you to kind of move some things around here. And then, like I said, we can kind of work on pushing this text so your lyrics are here, et cetera, et cetera. And then, losing one of these images, losing this image or losing this image, and kind of doing a similar thing like you have on this page, might open up a little bit more options for your text, or a little bit more room for your text as well. But I think overall, awesome start. All right, let's look at Ryan's here. There we go. I'm missing a font. I couldn't find it. Some of the fonts I was missing is fine. I couldn't find this one. But anyway, we'll cycle through your pages here. Oh yeah, right. So yeah, so we start here and then go to here. And then I do have one comment that's gonna probably change generally your whole overall look. But yeah, I think overall it's pretty well designed. I think what might throw things is, it's supposed to be 3 spreads of facing pages. So you want your start page to be on page 2. So you have a spread here. Basically all of your spreads are supposed to look like this. So you don't need the cover. I like the idea of the logo and your April 20, but it's not, it's not the cover necessarily. So this is starting in the middle of the magazine. So I think if you had, your start page can be somewhat similar. Obviously, if you had like this page and then this page to the right of it, it might look a little bit image heavy. You'll have to see once you kind of reorganize. Um, but once we turn this, actually, I'll show you. So let's do start page 2. There we go. So now how it moves everything around a little bit. So it's going to depend on what you think, and how you adjust it from there. But if you have your page numbers are a little funky here, but yeah, I would lose this, and then you can even potentially have a headline here. I'm just gonna move that out of the way there. Oops. Oh, I see what you did there. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Even if you had, there's another logo, or even if you did, trying to see how big this image is. Okay, it's square. Or even if you had, a headline go here to sort of cover this gap a little bit. Oh, I see what you did. Gotcha. Okay. Um, I see. Yep. That's a good trick there. But yeah, even if you had, a headline in this area rather than the logo, you could even um, pull from this, to have a headline here, and that will kind of cover what's going on here. I think what you did, I get what you did. I don't mind it. There's different things we could do in a more professional setting, but for the purposes of this assignment, it works. Um, but yeah, it's going to be reorganizing now that we have, which wasn't too bad actually. I thought it was going to push things all over the place. So I think we're missing, because I changed the font. So I think we're missing. So even if we had, you know, had this more centered, in this space a little bit. I like the idea of the albums here. Yeah, I think it's going to be a similar thing to other people, like reorganizing a little bit. There's, your gaps are a little bit funky. Um, where you have, like, I think this works pretty well, but you have some sort of funky-ish gaps with your, text and image. So like I might lose this image, and then, oh, I don't know if you have your text threaded. It looks like it might be copy and pasted rather than. Let's see if you have text threads. Show text threads. No. So yeah. So if you thread your text, this is again where we place our text rather than copying and pasting our text. So this way you can thread by clicking this out port and have it thread to this, and then so on and so forth, and have it thread through your entire publication. So this way, if you wanted this column to be a little bit bigger, it's going to readjust the text, for you. Um, I think even if you had like a pull quote, like, this is clearly a pull quote. So even if you had, you know, this is kind of like a pull quote, um, across the bottom, and then that sort of frees up this space a little bit. Again, threading that text is going to help a lot. Um, so with those adjustments, and again, I think like here, even if you had, this full quote there, and you can kind of get away with, bringing these down slightly to give yourself a little bit of room from the top there. But again, um, having that threaded text, even if you increase your text sizing just a little bit, would help sort of fill some of these gaps. And then maybe using an album picture here in this bottom spot, to sort of fill some space depending on how your text flows from column to column. Um, again, um, maybe even getting rid of this image, having, if this is a pull quote, having that be a little bit larger here. Um, yeah, and even like getting rid of this. Well, I mean, you have all the album covers there. If there was a more square image, you could put here, um, or another live image, um, or even if you just had, not talking, sorry. Even if you had this larger here, and then you can kind of bring this down a little bit, bring that down a little bit, and give these a little bit of breathing room. I might try to break up this text, this column, and see how it works. But it's not too bad there. It's going to depend on how your text flows from column to column after you get it placed and threaded, which we can still continue to do these drop caps. It's just going to be, we're going to have to put some column breaks in there, which we can certainly work on. Yeah, and then you just want to make sure that your page numbers are correct, and then we have our navigation buttons and our interactivity in there. But I think overall, a really good start. I think having, like I said, having that placed text and threaded throughout will help a lot with adjusting your design. But I think overall, it's a really good start. All right, we'll go to Melissa's here. So we have spread 1, spread 2, and spread 3. I think the main goal for yours is going to be that sort of balance between text and image. I think rather than having a lot of images and having them be smaller, maybe curate your images a little more. Maybe have like 1 or 2 nurse paintings, but have them larger, or even move them down and have this be a little bit larger. I think it's a little bit image heavy, and then you have this. I see how you're breaking up the sections, but maybe even find a different image because you have 2 similar images here. Find a different image to put in this section. And then on this page, you have a lot more text than images. I think you're gonna your main goal is gonna be sort of finding that balance between image and text, right? So I think if you actually, so like for this page specifically, I wouldn't worry so much about breaking up the sections as evenly as you have them, and really sort of more think about how they flow between page to page and then spread to spread, right? So how, even if the sections, like even if your early childhood section, for argument's sake, started here, as long as it flows from this spread to this spread and then so on and so forth. I like the idea of you kind of starting the article in the middle here. But I think trying to sort of keep that consistent is going to be a little bit difficult. I think for like an intro page, it works well. I think, like I said, curating your images, I think losing a lot of the images and just having them be larger, again, even if you had, 1 large cowboy image here and then the text kind of go around it, maybe 1 or 2 larger nurse images go here, et cetera, et cetera. And then that sort of frees up, like I said, this space. And even if you had this image a little bit larger here, and if we had sort of a more traditional feel here where you're using these 3 columns on one side, these 3 columns on this side, and have it be more sort of traditional magazine. You can have it start in the center here, but then go left, right here. I think that would help organize it a little bit more. I think your major thing is going to be, like I said, organizing that. I was just checking to see if you had threaded text. And again, that threaded text is going to help a lot. So again, if you've placed, we can see if you have, instead of copying and pasting your text, you want to make sure that you're placing your text. And you can start with the first text box, and you can see how you have all these little pluses here. This is all overset text. So you can have, even if you had this as 1 column, you have, when you click this box, this overset text, you can see it kind of loads your next, I guess, where you're going to put your next text here. And then now these 2 are threaded. And if we do, let's look at our extras, show text threads. So now you can see there's a line showing us that this is threaded to this. So now if we adjust this text box, you can see now it starts adjusting the text between all of the text boxes that you use. So it just makes sort of organizing a little bit better. That's why it's super important to place your text rather than copy and paste. It allows us to organize a little bit more. But yeah, I think organizing the text again, if you wanted to have a middle format with your intro pages, that'd be great. And then maybe going back to a left-right format, left-right format. And I think finding that balance between image and text is going to work really well for you. And then lastly here, Olivia Wells. We'll go through spread 1, spread 2, spread 3. And now we talked a bunch live in class, so there's not a ton to say about this one. I do have a couple little notes, but I think overall this is an excellent design. We did a couple of revisions during last class. So again, the use of graphics is great. You have your tire tracks. It works really well with their images. They have a lot with monster trucks, etc., cars. Those old muscle car kind of things. So doing your research really worked here. I like the idea of having these sort of translucent tape pieces, so it looks like the images are taped. Your use of color works really well, having a black background. Your pull quotes are excellent. I think everything flows really well. Having essentially your headline here pulling from the article, and then having one block of text I think works really well there. And then sort of having the asymmetrical balance on the outside here and then going back to your symmetrical balance I think works really well. I think your text flows really well. The use of graphics to kind of take up some of that column spacing, so it gives you room to play around with your text formatting I think works really well. Again, going from like the one block, and then you have a nice full quote block here, and then again you kind of have a similar look with your text boxes here as you do here. I think everything looks really consistent. My minor things would be I like the use of the stars as your previous and next. I don't know if I'd go as obvious as having arrows, but I'm not sure that people would know that those are next and previous buttons. I like the idea of having something different, but I don't know. I'm thinking like maybe something different. I'm thinking like if there was like sort of traffic arrows or something like that might work, because you have the car. That might be a little too on the nose, but you have that sort of car theme going on. But yeah, I think that's sort of my only kind of like minor nitpick. Is I like the idea of having those. They just kind of look like, if you didn't know that they were next and back buttons, I'm not sure that people would. People might accidentally discover that. You don't want to be like super duper obvious, or if I feel like you don't want to be super obvious because you have like a graphic rather than an arrow. But I think like kind of splitting the difference between, obviously you don't want like a giant flashing next and previous, but if we could maybe kind of stick with that same theme and have like, if there was like a traffic arrow or something that you could use, not like a detour sign, but you're kind of getting the idea. We can talk about it next class, but yeah, I think again, overall, we worked on this a lot during class. I think, yeah, I mean, like I said, I think graphically it works really well. Text flow works really well. This sort of like lyrical pull quote works great. Yeah, not a lot to say in this video. But yeah, I think overall, it works really well. I think maybe just finding some kind of idea for your next and previous navigation buttons, I think would work really well. I'm just going to look at your interactivity here, make sure that we have all of our interactive. Oh, that's not what I want. On my workspace, interactive, just to see if we have. Yeah, cool, thanks. Let's see, you have the hyperlink there, which works great. You do have your bookmarks, awesome, and your buttons and forms. Yeah, so everything works really well. Yeah, again, I think it's really kind of nitpicky with how well you have this designed, but I think, yeah, maybe finding an alternative for that next and previous button, I I think might work, to make it a little bit more obvious, but maybe not too on the nose. But yeah, I think overall, excellent, excellent job.